The moving truck rumbled away down the quiet, tree-lined street, leaving Olivia Bennett standing alone in the driveway of her new rental home. She tucked a loose strand of dark hair behind her ear, adjusting the yellow scarf that had been her constant companion since high school, a faded talisman of simpler times. The air was crisp with the promise of autumn, carrying the faint scent of freshly cut grass and distant rain. This was it, her fresh start. "Well, this is definitely not Atlanta," she murmured to herself, her voice a mix of exhaustion and tentative excitement as she surveyed the neighborhood. The houses here were a far cry from the bustling high-rise chaos she'd left behind. This street felt like a postcard from a quieter life, elegant homes with manicured lawns separated by tall hedges and wrought-iron gates exuding an air of understated wealth. Her own rental was the smallest on the block, a modest two-bedroom cottage with blue shutters framing the windows and a white porch that wrapped around like an inviting hug. It was charming in its simplicity, almost too perfect for what she could afford on her social worker's salary. The owner had quoted her a rent so low it bordered on suspicious when she'd inquired about the listing. "The right tenant matters more than the money," he had said over the phone, his tone warm but cryptic. It had seemed like a godsend after the months of upheaval, but now standing here with her boxes scattered like remnants of her old life, Olivia couldn't shake a nagging doubt. What if it was too good to be true? She had needed this change desperately. Atlanta had become a graveyard of memories, each corner haunted by the ghosts of what she'd lost. First there was Aunt Eleanor's stroke 6 months ago, a sudden cruel twist that had upended everything. Olivia had dropped her life to care for her aunt, the woman who had raised her and her sister Mia after their mother's death years earlier. Endless hospital visits, therapy sessions, and paperwork had drained her emotionally and financially. Then came Brandon, her fiancé of 3 years, who had walked out right in the thick of it. "I can't handle this pressure, Liv," he'd said, his voice cracking, but his eyes already distant. "You're always putting family first. What about us? What about me?" The words had stung like salt in an open wound, confirming what she'd feared. He saw her devotion as a flaw, not a strength. In the end, he'd packed his bags and left for a new job in Chicago, leaving her to pick up the pieces alone. Olivia sighed, pushing the memories aside as she hoisted the last box from the driveway. Her arms ached from the drive, but there was a quiet satisfaction in the physical labor. It felt like reclaiming control. She stepped inside the cottage, the wooden floor creaking softly under her feet, welcoming her like an old friend. The previous tenant had left most of the furniture, a worn leather sofa in the living room, a sturdy oak table in the kitchen, even some curtains that fluttered gently in the breeze from an open window. It was a blessing. She'd sold nearly everything before the move to lighten the load, both literally and metaphorically. Running her fingers along the back of the sofa, she wondered about the person who had lived here before. Why had they left so abruptly? The rental agent had mentioned a sudden relocation, but details were sparse. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, jolting her from her reverie. It was Mia, her younger sister, always the one to check in at just the right moment. Olivia set the box on the kitchen counter and answered, leaning against the cool granite surface. "Hey Mia," she said, forcing a lightness into her tone. "Did you make it? How's the house? Send pictures already?" Mia's voice bubbled with enthusiasm, a stark contrast to Olivia's subdued energy. At 28, Mia was the free spirit of the family graphic designer, by day eternal optimist, by nature, living her vibrant life in Atlanta without the weight of responsibilities that had always seemed to find Olivia. "I just finished unloading," Olivia replied, moving to the window to peer out at the small garden in the back. Neat rows of lavender and a climbing rose trellis caught the late afternoon sun, casting long shadows. "It's perfect, just like the photos. But the rent? It's still unbelievable. I keep waiting for the catch, like maybe the roof leaks or there's a ghost in the attic." Mia laughed, the sound warm and reassuring through the phone. "Stop worrying, Liv. You deserve a break after everything. Aunt Eleanor's stroked that jerk Brandon. You put your life on hold for everyone else. It's your turn now." Olivia's stomach tightened at the mention of Brandon. Even now his name evoked a mix of anger and lingering hurt. He'd been her rock, or so she'd thought, until the pressure cracked him. "I don't want to talk about him," she cut in, her voice sharper than intended. "Sorry, hearing his name still stings." "I'm sorry," Mia said, quickly, her tone softening. "My point is, you've spent your whole life taking care of us, of Mum when she was sick of me when I was a mess in college, of Aunt Eleanor now. New city, new job, new you. Embrace it." Olivia smiled despite herself, grateful for her sister's unwavering support. Mia had always been the one to pull her out of dark moods, reminding her of the light ahead. I know, that's why I'm here. Starting fresh at the community health centre next week, helping families like ours. It feels right. Exactly. So unpack, take a bubble bath, and call me tomorrow with all the juicy details. Love you, sis. Love you too. Olivia hung up, pocketing her phone as she wandered through the house again. The living room was cosy with built-in bookshelves waiting to be filled with her well-worn novels and professional journals. The bedroom overlooked the garden, its walls painted a soft blue that reminded her of calm skies after a storm. She imagined waking up here, sunlight filtering through the curtains, starting days unburdened by the past. But as she unpacked a box of kitchen essentials, the sound of a car engine drew her to the front window. A sleek black sedan pulled into the driveway of the grand estate next door, barely visible through the tall hedges and iron gates. A tall man in a dark suit stepped out, his movements efficient and purposeful, his face obscured as he vanished behind the gate. "So that's the neighbour," Olivia murmured, curiosity flickering briefly. The rental agent had described him as a private tech millionaire who kept to himself. "You'll probably never see him," she'd said with a shrug. Olivia turned away, dismissing the thought. Rich, reclusive neighbours weren't her concern. She had a life to rebuild one box one day at a time. Yet as she settled onto the sofa that evening, with a cup of tea, a strange sense of anticipation lingered. This place felt like more than just a rental. It hummed with potential, as if the universe had conspired to bring her here for reasons she couldn't yet fathom. Hope bloomed in her chest, fragile but real, pushing back the shadows of doubt. For the first time in months, Olivia allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the pieces of her shattered life could come together again. Alexander Hayes leaned back in his leather chair, the floor-to-ceiling windows of his home office framing the quiet street below. The late afternoon light filtered through, casting long shadows across the polished oak desk cluttered with monitors and papers. His gaze, however, wasn't on the financial reports flickering on the screen, or the endless emails from Hayes Ventures demanding his attention. Instead, it drifted to the small cottage next door where a single light glowed in the kitchen window. Olivia Bennett was there unpacking her life, oblivious to the storm she'd unwittingly stirred in his. He'd known it was her the moment her rental application crossed his desk. The name Olivia Bennett had hit him like a punch to the gut, dragging him back to humid Atlanta summers, stolen glances in English class, and the ache of a love he'd forced himself to bury 12 years ago. Her photo attached to the application confirmed it, those same hazel eyes, sharp with determination, yet softened by a kindness that had always undone him. Her hair was shorter now, a practical bob instead of the long waves he'd once run his fingers through, but she was unmistakably Olivia. His Olivia. Or rather, the girl who had been his, until he'd walked away convinced he was sparing her a life, tethered to someone unworthy. Alexander's fingers tightened around the pen in his hand, the metal cool against his skin. He'd bought the cottage next door years ago as a buffer, a way to keep the world at arm's length. Privacy was his currency in a life built on code and ambition, a shield against the chaos of his foster care childhood. When the previous tenant moved out, he'd listed it on a whim, setting an exorbitant rent to deter interest. But then her application arrived, sent through a rental agency he owned discreetly. He could have rejected it, could have kept her out of his carefully controlled orbit. Instead, he'd slashed the rent to a fraction of its value, ensuring she'd take it. It was reckless, selfish even, but the thought of her being close again after all these years had overridden logic. Now she was here mere yards away, and the weight of that choice pressed against his chest like a vice. He stood pacing to the window, his reflection a faint ghost against the glass. At 32, Alexander was no longer the lanky teenager who had lived in hand-me-downs, but the sharp lines of his tailored suit couldn't erase the boy who'd grown up believing he'd never be enough. Dorothy Klein, his foster mother, had seen something in him, a spark of brilliance in the way he'd taught himself to code on a library computer. She'd given him stability a chance, but even her faith hadn't silenced the voice in his head that echoed Mrs. Bennett's words, "You're not good enough for my daughter." Olivia deserves better than a foster kid with nothing. Those words had burned searing into his soul until he'd believed them. So he'd left, cutting contact without explanation, thinking it was the only way to free her. Now, staring at the cottage, he wondered if he'd been wrong. The rental agent had mentioned Olivia's recent struggles, a breakup, caring for a sick aunt. She was rebuilding just as he had all those years ago when he'd turned his pain into Hayes Ventures, a tech empire that made him untouchable. Yet here he was, rattled by her proximity, second-guessing every choice that had led to this moment. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was Lauren, his assistant, texting about a board meeting he'd forgotten. "Need to confirm your attendance for tomorrow. Reed's pushing for the merger again." Alexander sighed, tossing the phone onto the desk. Sophia Reed. His business partner was relentless. Her ambition a mirror to his own, but laced with a hunger for control he didn't trust. He typed a quick reply. "Cancel it. I'm unavailable," and turned back to the window. The cottage light flickered off, plunging the house into darkness. Olivia was settling in, unaware that the man next door was the boy who'd loved her, left her, and now wrestled with the ghost of what might have been. Alexander sank back into his chair, rubbing his temples. He'd keep his distance, let her live her life. But deep down he knew it wouldn't be that simple. Olivia had always been his weakness, and now with her so close, the walls he'd built around his heart felt paper-thin. The morning sun spilled through the lace curtains of Olivia Bennett's new cottage painting, golden patches across the hardwood floor. She sat on the porch, cradling a steaming mug of chamomile tea, her yellow scarf loosely draped over her shoulders. The air was cool, laced with the earthy scent of dew-soaked grass and the faint sweetness of the lavender bushes lining the garden. For the past week, Olivia had been settling into her routine early mornings, unpacking afternoons at the community health centre, orienting herself to her new role as a social worker, and evenings spent savouring the quiet of this unfamiliar city. The cottage was becoming home, its creaky floors and quirky corners a comfort after the chaos of Atlanta. Yet the low rent still gnawed at her, a puzzle with missing pieces. Who was this mysterious landlord, and why had they been so generous? Her thoughts were interrupted by the hum of a car engine next door. She glanced up, catching a glimpse of the black sedan pulling into the neighbouring estate's driveway, its gates swinging shut with a soft clang. The man who stepped out was tall, his broad shoulders filling out a charcoal suit, his movements clipped and purposeful. Olivia barely registered him, her mind drifting to her to-do list, grocery shopping, a call to Aunt Eleanor, until a fleeting sense of familiarity tugged at her. She shook it off, blaming the exhaustion of the move. Neighbours didn't matter. She was here to rebuild, not to dwell on shadows. By midday, Olivia found herself in the backyard, drawn to the small garden she'd discovered behind the cottage. It was a charming, overgrown patch, wild roses climbing a trellis lavender, swaying in the breeze, and a weathered bench tucked under an oak tree. She knelt to inspect a patch of daisies, their petals soft under her fingertips, and let herself breathe. This was what she'd craved, a moment of peace, a place to root herself. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mia. "How's the new life treating you? Found any cute neighbours yet?" Olivia smirked, typing a quick reply. "Just me and the daisies so far," before slipping the phone back into her pocket. As she stood brushing dirt from her jeans, a rustle from the other side of the wooden fence caught her attention. The neighbouring garden, partially visible through the slats, was a study in contrast, meticulously trimmed hedges, a sleek stone fountain and rows of roses that looked like they'd been arranged by an artist. Footsteps crunched on gravel, and then a figure appeared, a man, his back to her, watering a bed of tulips. He was tall, his dark hair catching the sunlight, and something about the way he moved, deliberate yet hesitant, sparked that same flicker of recognition. Olivia froze, her heart giving an unexpected lurch. It couldn't be Alexander. The name slipped out before she could stop it, a whisper carried by the breeze. The man stiffened his hand, pausing mid-motion. The watering can tilting slightly. He turned slowly, and when his eyes met hers, the world tilted with him. Alexander Hayes. The boy who'd stolen her heart at 17, who had shared earbuds with her in English class, who'd kissed her under the bleachers after a football game. The boy who'd vanished without a word 12 years ago, leaving her to piece together her shattered heart. His face was older now, sharper angles, a shadow of stubble eyes, a deeper grey than she remembered. But it was undeniably him, Olivia. He said, his voice low, almost a question, as if he couldn't believe she was standing there. The watering can slipped from his hand, hitting the ground with a dull thud, water spilling onto the gravel. Olivia's mug trembled in her grip, tea sloshing over the rim, burning her fingers. She set it on the bench, her movements jerky, her mind a storm of disbelief and anger. "You're my neighbour," she asked, her voice sharp, cutting through the quiet. "You're the one who rented me this place." The pieces clicked together. The low rent, the cryptic landlords, the estate next door. Her chest tightened, a mix of betrayal and confusion swirling inside her. Did you know it was me? Alexander hesitated, his jaw tightening. Yes, he admitted, stepping closer to the fence. I saw your application. I wanted to help. Help Olivia's laugh was bitter, edged with hurt. You disappear for 12 years. No call, no letter, nothing, and now you're helping me. What is this? Some kind of game? Her hands clenched into fists, nails biting into her palms. She could still feel the ache of those months after he'd left the endless questions, the way she'd blamed herself. Olivia. I'm sorry, he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. I never meant to hurt you. I thought... He stopped, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it twisted something deep inside her. Can we talk not here? Not like this. She shook her head, stepping back, the daisies brushing against her ankles. I don't even know who you are anymore, Alexander. You're not the boy I knew. Her voice cracked, betraying the emotion she'd buried for years. She turned, grabbing her mug, and strode back to the cottage, her heart pounding. Inside, she leaned against the door, her breath uneven. Alexander Hayes, her first love, was living next door, and he'd known she was here all along. She sank onto the couch, her mind racing. Why had he left? Why come back into her life now like this? She pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over Mia's number. She wanted to tell her sister everything, to unravel the knot of shock and anger, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she stared at the ceiling, the weight of the past pressing down on her. This wasn't the fresh start she'd imagined, it was a collision with everything she'd tried to leave behind. Alexander Hayes stood motionless in his garden, the spilled water from the fallen can pooling around his polished shoes, soaking the gravel. The air felt heavier now, thick with the echo of Olivia's words. You're not the boy I knew. Her voice, sharp with hurt, lingered in his ears, slicing through the carefully constructed walls he'd built over the past 12 years. He stared at the wooden fence separating their properties, its weathered slats a flimsy barrier against the flood of memories crashing over him. Olivia's hazel eyes, blazing with anger and betrayal, were the same ones that had once looked at him with unguarded trust, and the contrast was a knife to his chest. He'd known seeing her again would be hard, but nothing had prepared him for the raw pain in her gaze or the guilt it stirred in him. Inside his sprawling estate, Alexander paced the hardwood floors of his study, the room dim, despite the late afternoon light filtering through the tall windows. The space was a testament to his success. Bookshelves lined with first editions, a sleek desk holding monitors that tracked Hayes Ventures' global reach, but it felt hollow tonight. He sank into his chair, rubbing his temples, the weight of the past pressing down like a physical force. His mind drifted back to Atlanta, to the summer they were 17, when life had seemed infinite. He could still feel the warmth of Olivia's hand in his as they sprawled on the grass behind the school, sharing a single pair of earbuds, her laughter mingling with the music. They'd been inseparable, two kids dreaming of a future they couldn't yet define, bound by a love that felt invincible. Until it wasn't. The memory shifted, darkening. He was 18, sitting in the cramped living room of Olivia's family home, Mrs. Bennet's cold gaze pinning him to the couch. You're a foster kid, Alexander. No family, no prospects. Olivia has a bright future, college, a career. Do you really think you're good enough for her? Her words had been calm, deliberate, each one landing like a blow. He'd wanted to argue, to tell her about the coding projects he'd been working on, the scholarship he'd earned, but doubt had already taken root. He was the boy who'd grown up in hand-me-downs, shuffled between homes, always on the outside looking in. Dorothy Klein, his foster mother, had given him stability, taught him to channel his anger into code, but even her encouragement couldn't erase the truth. He had nothing to offer. Olivia but love, and Mrs. Bennet had convinced him that wasn't enough. So he had left. No note, no call, just a clean break, or so he'd thought. He'd poured himself into building Hayes Ventures, turning his pain into a tech empire, believing distance would free Olivia to chase the life her mother envisioned. But every milestone, the first million, the IPO, the Forbes cover, had felt empty without her. When her rental application landed on his desk, it was like fate mocking him. He'd lowered the rent, told himself it was a small act of atonement, a way to give her the fresh start she deserved. But seeing her today, the hurt in her eyes, he knew it hadn't been enough. It would never be enough. Alexander's phone buzzed, pulling him back to the present. An email from the rental agency confirmed Olivia's move-in status with a note about her inquiries into the landlord's identity. He'd kept it anonymous, using a shell company to shield himself, but now he wondered if that had been a mistake. She deserved answers, not more secrets. He opened his laptop, pulling up the property management software, and double-checked the rent adjustment. It was locked in untraceable to him unless she dug deeper. He hesitated, then typed a quick message to Lauren, his assistant, ensure the cottage maintenance is covered. No questions from the tenant. It was a small gesture, but it felt like all he could do without crossing a line he wasn't ready to face. He crossed to the window, gazing at Olivia's cottage. The kitchen light was on again, a soft glow cutting through the dusk. He imagined her inside unpacking, maybe sipping that chamomile tea she'd always loved. The urge to walk over to knock on her door and explain everything was overwhelming, but fear held him back. What could he say that he'd left because he'd believed her mother, that he'd spent years regretting it, tracking her life from afar through social media and news clippings, that he'd bought the cottage next door to keep the world out, only to let her in? Alexander pressed his forehead against the cool glass, whispering, "I'm sorry, Liv." The words were for her, for himself, for the years they'd lost. He'd stay away, let her rebuild without his shadow looming over her. But as he turned from the window, the ache in his chest told him it wouldn't be that simple. Olivia was here, and with her came the past he'd never truly escaped. Olivia Bennett gripped the steering wheel of her beat-up sedan, the city blurring past as she wove through quiet streets, the hum of the engine, a faint counterpoint to the storm in her mind. The morning air was cool, slipping through the cracked window, carrying the scent of asphalt and distant coffee shops. It had been 3 days since she'd seen Alexander Hayes in the garden, his grey eyes piercing through the years, unravelling the careful stitches she'd used to mend her heart after he'd vanished. Her neighbour, her landlord, her first love. The revelation had left her reeling, a cocktail of anger, confusion, and something softer she refused to name. She'd driven aimlessly for hours now, circling the city to outrun the questions crowding her thoughts. Why had he left? Why come back into her life like this, orchestrating her move with a suspiciously low rent? And why, after all this time, did seeing him still make her chest ache? She pulled into a park, the gravel crunching under her tyres as she parked near a cluster of maples, their leaves just beginning to turn gold. Her phone sat heavy in her pocket, buzzing earlier, with a missed call from Mia, but Olivia wasn't ready to talk, not yet. Instead, she rummaged through her bag, fingers brushing against a crumpled business card she'd found tucked into the cottage's lease agreement. Hayes Ventures Alexander Hayes, CEO. The card was sleek minimalist, but the weight of his name pressed against her. She'd Googled him last night, unable to resist. Tech prodigy, self-made millionaire, dubbed the Ghost CEO for his reclusive nature. Articles painted him as brilliant but untouchable, a man who'd built an empire from nothing. Nothing she thought bitterly, except the pieces of her he'd left behind. The drive hadn't calmed her, so she called Aunt Eleanor, her anchor through every storm. The phone rang twice before Eleanor's warm, slightly raspy voice answered. "Liv, honey, how's the new place settling in okay?" Olivia hesitated, her throat tightening. "It's complicated." She recounted the encounter with Alexander, her words tumbling out his sudden appearance, the admission about the rent, the way his apology had sounded sincere but incomplete. "He's my neighbour, Aunt Elle. He knew I was moving in. How am I supposed to live next door to him?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment, the faint hum of her TV in the background. "That boy always carried too much on his shoulders," she said finally. "I remember how he looked at you like you hung the moon. But he was scared, Liv, scared he wasn't enough. Maybe he's trying to make amends." "Amends." Olivia's voice rose sharp with frustration. He left without a word. 12 years, and now he's playing landlord. I don't trust this. She leaned her head against the seat, closing her eyes. What if he's just manipulating me? "Talk to him," Eleanor urged. "You won't find peace until you know why. You're stronger than you think, Liv. You've carried worse than this." The call ended, but Eleanor's words lingered a challenge. Olivia wasn't sure she was ready to face. By evening, she was back at the cottage, the setting sun casting long shadows across the garden. Her phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. "Olivia, it's Alexander. Can we talk?" "In the garden tomorrow at 6. Her pulse quickened, anger flaring anew. She typed a curt reply, "Fine, 6 p.m, and tossed the phone onto the couch, her hands trembling. The next evening she stood by the oak tree and her garden arms crossed the air thick with the scent of roses and impending rain. Alexander arrived promptly, his dark sweater and jeans a stark contrast to the polished suit from before. He looked less like a CEO and more like the boy she'd loved, and that made it worse. "Thanks for coming," he said, his voice low, cautious. "I owe you an explanation." "Then start talking." Olivia snapped, her hazel eyes locked on his. "Why am I here? Why the cheap rent? Did you think you could just buy your way back into my life?" Alexander flinched, but he didn't look away. "I saw your application through my property company. I didn't plan for you to move here, it was chance. But when I saw your name, He paused, running a hand through his hair, a gesture that tugged at her memories. "I lowered the rent because I knew you were starting over. After your breakup, I wanted to help, even if it was from a distance." Olivia's breath caught. "You knew about Brandon, about Aunt Eleanor." "How I kept tabs," he admitted, his gaze dropping to the grass. "Not in a creepy way, I just checked in over the years. Social media news. I needed to know you were okay." "That's not okay," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. "You don't get to vanish and then watch my life like some spectator. Why did you leave Alexander? What was so bad that you couldn't even say goodbye?" He opened his mouth, then closed it, his jaw tight. "It's complicated," he said finally. "I thought I was doing what was best for you. Can we talk more tomorrow? I'll tell you everything, I promise." Olivia stared at him, her heart warring between fury and the faint pull of the boy she'd once known. "Tomorrow," she said coldly, turning back to the cottage. As she closed the door, the weight of his promise settled over her, heavy with the past she wasn't sure she could face. The early morning light filtered through the cottage's kitchen window, casting a soft glow over the oak table, where Olivia Bennet sat, her fingers tracing the rim of a chipped ceramic mug. The scent of brewed coffee mingled with the faint lavender drifting in from the garden, grounding her in the quiet routine she'd begun to build. A week had passed since her tense exchange with Alexander Hayes in the garden, his promise to explain still hanging between them like an unspoken challenge. She hadn't pressed him for answers, not yet. Instead, they'd fallen into an uneasy rhythm, a fragile dance of cautious greetings and fleeting glances over the fence. Each morning she'd catch sight of him on his porch, a silhouette against the dawn, and each time her heart twisted with a mix of resentment and curiosity. Who was he now, this man who'd once been her everything? Olivia sipped her coffee, her thoughts drifting to the past. At 17, Alexander had been her safe harbour. His shy smile, the way he'd scribble poetry in the margins of her notebooks, the warmth of his hand as they walked home from school, his disappearance had shattered her, leaving her to question her worth, her choices. Now living next door, he was both a stranger and a ghost, his presence stirring memories she'd buried deep. She glanced at the stack of books on the counter, social work manuals, a worn copy of The Great Gatsby, and noticed a small parcel tucked beneath them. It hadn't been there yesterday. Curious, she unwrapped it to find a slim volume of poetry. Its cover faded, but familiar, Pablo Neruda, the same edition they'd read together in high school. A note slipped out, written in Alexander's precise handwriting. "Found this in a used bookstore. Thought you'd like it. Dinner tonight, my place, 7 p.m. Alex." Her breath caught the old nickname, a pang in her chest. She wanted to tear the note apart, to reject the gesture, but her fingers lingered on the book, tracing the creases where they'd once marked favourite lines. Against her better judgment, she texted him 7 p.m. "Don't make me regret this." The reply came instantly. "I won't. Promise." By evening, Olivia stood at Alexander's gate, her heart pounding as she pressed the intercom. The estate loomed before her, its modern lines softened by ivy and blooming roses a world apart from her cosy cottage. The gate buzzed open, and Alexander appeared at the door, his usual suit replaced by a navy sweater and jeans, his dark hair slightly tousled. "You came," he said, a hint of relief in his grey eyes. "Come in." The interior was as striking as she'd imagined. High ceilings, polished wood floors, and walls adorned with abstract art that spoke of wealth but not warmth. Yet the dining room felt different. A long table set for 2 candles, flickering, and the aroma of roasted vegetables and garlic wafting from the kitchen. "I cooked," Alexander said, a shy smile breaking through. "Well, tried to. Don't expect miracles." Olivia raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement softening her guard. "You?" "Cooking, I remember you burning toast in Aunt Eleanor's kitchen." He laughed, the sound low and genuine, easing the tension. "I've had 12 years to practice. Come on, give me a chance." Dinner was surprisingly good grilled chicken, herbed potatoes, a simple salad, and the conversation flowed easier than she'd expected. They talked about her work at the community health centre, the families she was helping, and his role at Hayes Ventures, though he skimmed over details with practiced deflection. "It's just code and meetings," he said, waving a hand. "Your work sounds more meaningful. Helping kids' families, it's what you always wanted." She nodded, her fork pausing mid-air. "It's exhausting, but it feels right. Like I'm making a difference." She hesitated, then added, "You never told me what you wanted back then." "Not really." Alexander's smile faded, his gaze dropping to his plate. "I didn't know, not then. I just wanted you." The admission hung between them, heavy with unspoken history. Olivia's throat tightened, but she didn't press. Not yet. After dinner, they moved to his living room, where a bookshelf caught her eye. Among the tech journals and biographies was a small photo album, its leather cover worn. "May I?" she asked, and he nodded, his expression unreadable. Inside were snapshots of her graduation, a newspaper clipping about her college scholarship, a candid from a charity run she'd done years ago. "You kept these?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I never stopped caring," Alexander said quietly, standing behind her. "I know I hurt you, Liv. I thought I was doing the right thing, letting you go. But I couldn't let you disappear completely." She closed the album, her hands shaking. "You don't get to do this," she said, her voice low but firm. "You don't get to walk back into my life with poems and pictures and expect it to fix everything." She turned to leave, but his hand grazed her arm, stopping her. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "Just a chance to explain. Tomorrow in the garden. Please." Olivia met his gaze, seeing the boy she'd loved beneath the man he'd become. "One chance," she said, finally stepping toward the door. As she walked back to her cottage, the weight of his words and the album lingered, a fragile thread pulling her toward a past she wasn't sure she could face. The Saturday morning air was alive with the hum of the city's farmers' market, a vibrant patchwork of stalls spilling across the town square. Olivia Bennett wove through the crowd, a canvas tote slung over her shoulder, the scent of fresh basil and warm bread mingling with the chatter of vendors and laughter of children. She'd agreed to meet Alexander Hayes here on neutral ground after their dinner. The previous night had left her heart tangled in a web of old affection and fresh wounds. His invitation had been tentative, slipped into a text after she'd left his house market tomorrow. "We can grab ingredients cooked together. I owe you the truth." She'd hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen, but curiosity and something deeper, something she refused to name, had won out. "Okay." 10 a.m. she'd replied, her resolve to keep him at arm's length already fraying. Alexander stood by a stall piled high with heirloom tomatoes, his navy jacket and easy posture blending into the crowd, though his height and quiet intensity drew glances. He spotted her, his grey eyes lighting up with a warmth that made her stomach flip. "You made it," he said, a relieved smile breaking through. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't." Olivia admitted, adjusting her scarf. The yellow fabric felt like armour today, a reminder of the girl she'd been before he'd broken her heart. "But you promised answers, and I'm holding you to it." He nodded, his expression sobering. "Fair enough. Let's shop for... First keep it light, then we'll talk." They moved through the market, picking out zucchini fresh rosemary and a loaf of crusty sourdough, their conversation deliberately casual, his preference for spicy food, her love of desserts. But the ease of it, the way they fell into step like they had as teenagers, unsettled her. It was too familiar, too right, and she hated how much she wanted it to last. Back at her cottage, they set to work in the small kitchen, the space filling with the sizzle of olive oil and the sharp tang of garlic. Alexander chopped vegetables with surprising skill, his movements precise, while Olivia kneaded dough for flatbread, stealing glances at him. The domesticity of it, the clink of knives, the shared laughter, when he dropped a carrot, felt like a glimpse into a life they might have had. But the weight of his unspoken explanation loomed a shadow neither could ignore. They carried their meal, grilled vegetables, herb chicken, and warm flatbread to the garden, settling on the bench under the oak tree. The late afternoon sun dappled the grass, the air heavy with the scent of roses and the promise of rain. Olivia took a bite, savouring the flavours, but her eyes were on Alexander, searching for the boy she'd loved in the man before her. "This is good," she said, setting her plate down. "But I didn't come here for dinner. You said you'd tell me everything, so talk." Alexander set his plate aside, his hands resting on his knees, fingers flexing as if bracing himself. "I owe you that," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "When I left 12 years ago, it wasn't because I stopped loving you. I never stopped." He paused, his gaze fixed on the lavender swaying in the breeze, avoiding her eyes. "It was your mother," Olivia's breath caught her fork clattering against the plate. My mother. Her voice was sharp, disbelieving. What does she have to do with this? Alexander exhaled, running a hand through his dark hair, a gesture she knew meant he was nervous. That summer before senior year, she called me to your house one day when you were at debate practice. She sat me down, told me I wasn't good enough for you, said you had a bright future, college, a career, a life I couldn't give you. I was a foster kid, Liv. No family, no money, just a scholarship and a dream of coding something big. She said I'd hold you back, that loving you meant letting you go. Livia's chest tightened, a mix of shock and betrayal flooding her. Her mother, the woman who'd raised her to be strong, independent, had orchestrated this. She had no right, she whispered, her voice trembling. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you fight for us? I tried, Alexander said, his eyes finally meeting hers raw with regret. I argued, told her I'd work hard, make something of myself, but she was so certain, so convincing. I was 18, Liv. I'd spent my life being told I was nothing. Your mum, she wasn't cruel, she was practical. She said you deserved someone who could give you stability, not a kid with no roots. And I believed her. Tears stung Olivia's eyes, hot and unbidden. She stood pacing a few steps, the grass soft under her sneakers. You believed her over me, over us. Her voice broke, years of hurt spilling out. I waited for you. Alexander. I checked my phone, my mailbox for months. I thought I'd done something wrong. You didn't, he said quickly, standing to, his voice urgent. It was me. I was ashamed, Liv. I thought I was saving you, giving you a chance at the life she wanted for you. I was wrong. I've spent every day since regretting it. Olivia turned away, wiping her eyes, the lavender blurring through her tears. Her mother's face flashed in her mind, stern, loving, always pushing her to be better. Had she really seen Alexander as a threat to that? The betrayal cut deep a wound she hadn't known was there. You should have told me, she said, her voice quieter now, raw. I deserve to know. I know, Alexander said, stepping close to her but stopping short of touching her. I'm telling you now because I can't keep running from this. From you. She spun to face him, anger flaring again. You don't get to decide that now, Alexander. You don't get to walk back into my life and expect me to just forgive you. Her hands shook and she crossed her arms, clutching the scarf like a lifeline. Get out! Liv, please, get out! She shouted, her voice echoing in the garden. Alexander froze his face, a mask of pain, then nodded once, turning to leave. The gate clicked shut behind him, and Olivia sank onto the bench, her sobs breaking free. The truth was out, but it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like a new kind of cage built from the ashes of a love she'd never stopped mourning. The garden was shrouded in dusk, the lavender and roses fading into silhouettes as the last light bled from the sky. Olivia Bennett sat on the bench beneath the oak tree, her knees drawn to her chest, the yellow scarf bunched in her hands like a lifeline. The air was cool, carrying the faint metallic tang of approaching rain, but she barely noticed. Her sobs had quieted, leaving a hollow ache in their wake. Alexander's confession, her mother's role in tearing them apart, felt like a stone lodged in her chest, heavy and unyielding. She'd always seen her mother as a pillar flawed but fiercely protective, guiding her and Mia through a world that demanded strength. To learn that she'd orchestrated Alexander's departure, manipulating his insecurities to sever their love, was a betrayal that cut deeper than his absence ever had. Olivia's fingers tightened around the scarf, its frayed edges a reminder of the girl she'd been hopeful, trusting in love. She'd spent years rebuilding herself after Alexander left, convincing herself she'd moved on. But now, with him next door, his words echoing in her mind, she felt like that 17-year-old again, raw and exposed. How could her mother have decided her future without a word? How could Alexander have believed her walking away without a fight? The questions swirled, each one a fresh wound, and she pressed her palms to her eyes, willing the tears to stop. Her phone buzzed on the bench, the screen lighting up with Aunt Eleanor's name. Olivia hesitated, her thumb hovering over the decline button. She wasn't ready to unpack this with anyone, not even Mia, but Eleanor's steady presence had always been her anchor. She answered, her voice hoarse. Hey, Aunt El. Liv, honey. You sound like you've been crying. Eleanor's voice was warm but tinged with concern, cutting through the static of the call. What's wrong? Is it the new job at the house? Olivia exhaled shakily, staring at the darkening garden. It's Alexander. He told me why he left. She recounted the conversation, her words halting as she described her mother's intervention, the way Alexander had believed he was saving her by disappearing. I'm so angry, Aunt El. At Mum, at him, at myself for not seeing it. How could she do that to me? Eleanor was silent for a moment, the faint hum of her TV in the background, a familiar comfort. Your mother loved you, Liv, but she had a hard way of showing it sometimes. She saw you as her legacy, her chance to fix her own mistakes. Alexander. He was young, scared, and he didn't have the roots to stand up to her. That doesn't make it right, but it makes it human. Human doesn't make it hurt less, Olivia said, her voice breaking. I thought I was over him, but seeing him knowing this, it's like losing him all over again. You're not losing him, Eleanor said gently. He's right there trying to make amends. The question is, what do you want to hold on to the anger, or to see if there's something worth salvaging? Olivia didn't answer, her throat too tight. After promising to call tomorrow, she hung up the silence of the garden enveloping her. Eleanor's words echoed, "What do you want?" but the answer felt like a maze with no exit. She wanted the years back, the chance to choose for herself. She wanted to stop feeling like the ground was shifting beneath her. Her phone buzzed again this time, with a text from Alexander. I'm sorry for tonight. I'll give you space. Let me know when you're ready to talk. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that made her chest ache. She didn't reply instead, slipping the phone into her pocket and heading inside. The cottage was quiet, the kitchen still scented with garlic and rosemary from their meal, a reminder of the fleeting warmth they'd shared. She sank onto the couch, curling into herself, the Neruda book on the coffee table catching her eye. She didn't open it. Not tonight. By morning, the rain had come and had gone, leaving the garden glistening. Olivia stood at her kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching the world wake up. She felt raw like a bruise pressed too hard, but Eleanor's question lingered. She couldn't change the past, but she could decide what came next. Her phone sat on the counter, Alexander's message still unanswered. She typed slowly, her fingers hesitant. Garden, 6 p.m. Let's finish this. As she hit send, a mix of dread and resolve settled over her. She wasn't ready to forgive, not yet, but she was ready to listen. The truth had broken something open, and whether it led to healing or more pain, she needed to face it. The garden with its roses and memories would be their battleground, and for the first time in days, Olivia felt a flicker of strength. She was done running. The garden glowed under the fading light of dusk, the roses catching the last rays of sun as their petals shimmered like embers. Olivia Bennett stood by the oak tree, her yellow scarf knotted loosely around her neck, its frayed ends fluttering in the gentle breeze. The air carried the sweet tang of lavender, and the earthy promise of rain grounding her as she waited for Alexander Hayes. Her heart thudded, a mix of resolve and trepidation. Last night's conversation, his raw confession about her mother's interference, her own tear-streaked anger, had left her drained but awake, as if a veil had lifted. She'd agreed to meet him again, not out of forgiveness, but a need to understand, to reclaim the pieces of herself scattered by his absence 12 years ago. Alexander appeared at the gate, his silhouette tall against the twilight, his navy sweater and jeans softening the CEO sharpness she'd glimpsed before. His grey eyes met hers, cautious but steady, carrying a weight that mirrored her own. "Thanks for coming," he said, his voice low, almost swallowed by the rustle of leaves. "I wasn't sure you would." I wasn't sure either, Olivia admitted, crossing her arms, the scarf a shield against the vulnerability creeping into her chest. "But I can't keep running from this. From you." She gestured to the bench, and they sat, the space between them both a chasm and a bridge. "You said you'd tell me everything. I'm listening." Alexander exhaled, his hands clasped tightly, knuckles pale. "I've spent years replaying that summer, Liv. I was 18, full of dreams but no confidence. Your mum, she wasn't wrong about me then. I had nothing but a scholarship and a laptop. When she said I'd hold you back, I believed her, because I already felt it. I left to prove I could be more, but I lost you in the process." Olivia's throat tightened, her mother's face flashing in her mind, stern loving, always pushing her toward a future she deemed worthy. "She had no right to decide for me," she said, her voice sharp but trembling. "And you should have trusted me to choose you." "I know," he said, his gaze dropping to the grass. "I was a coward, but I'm not that kid anymore. I built Hayes Ventures, became someone who could stand beside you. When I saw your rental application, it felt like a second chance not to fix the past, but to be honest. I lowered the rent to help you, no strings attached. I just wanted you to have a soft landing." The sincerity in his voice cracked something in her, a wall she'd built to keep him out. She wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the hurt, but his words stirred memories of the boy who'd written her poems, who'd stayed up late helping her study. No strings, she asked, her tone softer now. Then why do I feel like I'm caught in something bigger? He looked at her, his eyes raw. Because it is bigger. It's us. It's always been us. The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Over the next week, they fell into a cautious rhythm, morning waves over the fence, brief chats about the weather, or her work at the community health centre. Alexander began opening up, sharing stories of his early days coding in foster homes, the loneliness behind his success. Olivia found herself listening, her guard lowering with each conversation. He wasn't the boy who'd left, nor the untouchable CEO from the articles. He was something new, a man grappling with his past as much as she was. One evening, Alexander invited her to a charity gala for a local foster care organisation, a rare public appearance for the ghost show. Olivia hesitated, her fingers twisting the scarf as she stood in her bedroom staring at a simple green dress in her closet. Going meant stepping into his world, risking exposure to the feelings she'd buried. But the memory of his voice, it's always been us, pushed her forward. She arrived at the venue, a grand hall aglow with chandeliers, her nerves buzzing as she spotted Alexander in a tailored suit, his presence commanding yet softened by the way he sought her out. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice warm as he offered his arm. She took it, her heart racing at the contact. The gala was a whirl of speeches and clinking glasses, but the moment that anchored her was Alexander's. He took the stage, his usual reserve replaced by a quiet conviction as he spoke about his foster care childhood, the mentors who'd given him a chance, and the importance of second chances. "I learned late that running from your past doesn't heal it," he said, his eyes finding Olivia's in the crowd. "Sometimes you have to face it to rebuild what you broke." The room applauded, but Olivia barely heard, her chest tight with emotion. He was talking to her, not the crowd, and the weight of his growth, his vulnerability shifted something inside her. Later, as they stood on the balcony, the city lights sprawling below, she turned to him. "That was brave," she said. "You're not who I thought you'd become. I'm trying to be better," he replied, his voice soft. "For me, for you if you'll let me." Olivia didn't answer, but as they walked back to the cottage, her hand brushed his and she didn't pull away. The garden waited, a quiet witness to their slow rebuilding, and for the first time Olivia felt the possibility of trust taking root. The morning sun filtered through the cottage's lace curtains, casting delicate patterns across the oak table, where Olivia Bennett sat, her coffee cooling untouched. The past weeks had been a slow unravelling, each conversation with Alexander Hayes, peeling back layers of hurt and rebuilding fragile threads of trust. Their evenings in the garden, the gala where he'd bared his soul, had softened her defences, but the weight of their shared past still lingered. She glanced at the Neruda book on the counter, its pages marked with their teenage annotations, a quiet reminder of the love they'd once had and the possibility of something new. Yet as she sipped her coffee, a nagging unease settled in her chest. Things were moving too fast, too close to the edge of something she wasn't sure she could handle. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. A text from Mia, her sister, popped up. "Check the news. You and your mystery neighbour are trending." Olivia's stomach dropped. She opened her browser, her fingers trembling as she typed Alexander's name. The headlines hit like a cold wave: Ghost CEO Alexander Hayes, spotted with mystery woman at charity gala. Below was a grainy photo, her and Alexander on the balcony, his hand brushing hers, her green dress catching the light. The article speculated wildly. Is this the woman who's cracked the reclusive tech mogul's shell? Comments flooded some curious others. Vicious gold digger alert. And who's this? Nobody cozying up to Hayes. Olivia's cheeks burned a mix of embarrassment and anger. She'd wanted a fresh start, not a spotlight. The cottage door swung open, and Mia burst in, her curly hair bouncing, her eyes wide with excitement. "Liv, you're famous," she teased, dropping her bag on the couch. "I drove up as soon as I saw the article." "Spill everything. Is this Alexander guy the real deal, or do I need to have a word with him?" Olivia groaned, burying her face in her hands. "It's not like that, Mia. We're just talking, figuring things out. And now this." He gestured at her phone, the photo glaring back. "I didn't sign up for this." Mia sat beside her, her playful grin softening. "Okay, but you looked happy in that picture. Happier than I've seen you since Brandon bailed. So what's the deal with this guy? You said he's your neighbour, but there's more, right?" Olivia sighed, recounting the past weeks, the garden. Backsalks, Alexander's confession about their mother's interference, the gala, where he'd spoken of second chances. Mia listened, her brow furrowing. Mum did that, God live, that's messed up. But this Alexander, he sounds like he's trying. Are you going to let him? I don't know, Olivia admitted, her voice small. I want to trust him, but then this happens. She waved at the phone. His world, it's too big, too public. I'm a social worker, Mia. I don't belong in headlines. Mia squeezed her hand. You belong wherever you choose to be. But if this guy's serious, he needs to step up. Let's see what he's made of. She grinned, a spark of mischief in her eyes. Invite him over. I want to meet the man who's got my sister in knots. Reluctantly, Olivia texted Alexander. We need to talk. My sister's here. Come over. His reply was instant. Be there in 10. True to his word, he arrived. His usual Polish replaced by a rumpled sweater and jeans. His grey eyes clouded with worry as he stepped into the cottage. I saw the article, he said before she could speak. I'm sorry, Liv. I didn't think you didn't think, Olivia cut in, her voice sharp. You're a CEO, Alexander. You know how this works. People take pictures, they talk. And now I'm mystery woman on every gossip site. Mia stood arms crossed, sizing him up. So you're the guy who broke my sister's heart and now wants a redo. Why should we trust you? Alexander met her gaze, unflinching. You shouldn't, not yet. I hurt Olivia once and I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it if she lets me. The article? I'll handle it. My team's already pulling it down. Mia raised an eyebrow but nodded, stepping back. Olivia felt a flicker of gratitude for her sister's protectiveness, but her focus was on Alexander. This isn't just about the article, she said. It's your life public complicated. I don't know if I fit in it. Before he could respond, his phone rang the screen, flashing Sophia Reed. He silenced it, but the name sent a jolt through Olivia. Sophia, his business partner, had been mentioned in passing, a sharp, ambitious woman driving Hayes Ventures' latest merger. The call felt like an intrusion, a reminder of the world pulling at him. Answer it, Olivia said, her voice flat. It's fine. Alexander hesitated, then stepped outside, his voice low as he spoke. Olivia turned to Mia, who whispered, He's trying, Liv, but you need to decide what you can handle. When Alexander returned, his jaw was tight. Sophia's pushing for a board meeting tomorrow. She's not thrilled about the publicity, says it's a distraction. He looked at Olivia, his eyes searching. I don't care about her opinion. I care about you. Tell me what you need. Olivia's heart wavered, caught between fear and the pull of his sincerity. I need time, she said finally. And I need you to be honest, no more surprises. He nodded, his expression resolute. No more surprises. I'll keep the world out, Liv. Just don't shut me out. As he left, Mia nudged Olivia's shoulder. He's got it bad for you, but you're the one calling the shots now. Olivia stared at the door, the weight of her choice settling over her. The world was watching, but in the quiet of her cottage she felt the first stirrings of courage to decide for herself. The cottage was silent, save for the soft patter of rain against the windows, a gentle rhythm that mirrored the unease in Olivia Bennett's heart. She sat curled on the couch, her yellow scarf draped over her knees, the glow of a single lamp casting shadows across the room. The scent of chamomile tea lingered untouched in its mug as her mind replayed the events of the past day. The invasive article, Mia's protective scrutiny, Alexander's promise to shield her from his world's chaos. His words had been earnest, his grey eyes pleading for a chance, but the weight of the public spotlight and Sophia Reed's call had left her rattled. Could she trust him to keep her safe, not just from gossip, but from the pain of another abandonment? The question gnawed at her, a quiet storm beneath her calm exterior. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the roof as Olivia's phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was Alexander. Can I come over? Need to see you. Her fingers hesitated, the memory of his touch at the gala warm grounding, clashing with the hurt of years past. She typed back, okay, front porch. Neutral ground felt safer, a way to keep her heart at arm's length. Minutes later, Alexander appeared at the gate, his dark hair damp from the rain, his navy coat clinging to his broad shoulders. He carried no umbrella, as if the storm were an afterthought. Olivia stepped onto the porch, the cool air sharp against her skin, her scarf a thin shield against the chill. You're soaked, she said, her voice softer than she intended, gesturing to the wicker chairs under the awning. Sit. He shook his head, staying where he was, water dripping from his hair onto his collar. I don't want to sit, Liv. I need to say this. His voice was low, urgent, cutting through the rain's steady hum. I've been running from this for 12 years and I'm done. I love you. I loved you then when we were kids sharing earbuds and dreaming of forever. I loved you when I walked away thinking it was the only way to give you a better life. And I love you now, standing here knowing I don't deserve you, but hoping you'll give me a chance to try." Olivia's breath caught her heart pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it. The rain blurred the world beyond the porch, cocooning them in this moment, his words stripping away the years. She wanted to lash out to demand why he thought love could erase the pain, but the raw vulnerability in his eyes, the boy she'd loved, now a man bearing his soul, held her silent. "Alexander," she started, her voice trembling, "you broke me. Do you know what it was like waiting for you? Wondering what I did wrong?" "I know," he said, stepping closer, the porch creaking under his weight. "I see it every time I look at you, the hurt I caused. I thought I was nothing, Liv. Your mum, she saw it too, but I was wrong to believe her wrong to leave without telling you. I've built this life, Hayes. Ventures, the money, the name, but it's empty without you." Her eyes stung tears, mixing with the mist carried by the wind. "And now? Your world is so big, Alexander. The articles, the gossip Sophia read breathing down your neck. How do I fit into that? How do I trust you won't disappear again? You fit because you're the only thing that ever made sense," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't care about the headlines or Sophia's games. I'll walk away from it all if that's what it takes to prove I'm here for you. I choose you, Liv. I always will." The words hit like a wave, crashing through her defenses. She stood closing the distance between them, her hands trembling as she reached for his. His fingers were cold slick with rain, but they curled around hers with a warmth that felt like home. "I'm scared," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "But I love you too." I never stopped. Alexander's eyes softened, a smile breaking through the tension. He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers, the rain a soft curtain around them. "Then let's figure this out together," he murmured. "No more running." She nodded, her heart racing as he tilted her chin up, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that was both a memory and a promise. It was soft at first, tentative, then deepening with the weight of years lost and found. The rain fell harder, soaking her scarf, but she didn't care. For the first time in 12 years, Olivia felt whole, anchored by the man she'd never stopped loving. As they pulled apart, breathless, Alexander tucked a damp strand of hair behind her ear. "We'll take it slow," he said. "Whatever you need." Olivia smiled, her fingers still laced with his. "Just you," she said. "That's enough for now." The rain had stopped by Palmware morning, leaving the air crisp and the garden outside Olivia Bennett's cottage glistening with dew. She stood at the kitchen counter, her hands wrapped around a warm mug of chamomile tea, the familiar scent grounding her after a sleepless night. Alexander's confession on the porch, "I love you." "I always will," echoed in her mind, each word a spark reigniting feelings she'd buried for 12 years. Their kiss, tentative yet fierce, had felt like a bridge between the past and a fragile new beginning. But the weight of his world, the headlines, the scrutiny, Sophia Reed's intrusive call loomed like a storm cloud threatening the delicate trust they were rebuilding. Olivia's heart wavered between hope and fear, unsure if love could withstand the pressures pulling at Alexander Hayes. Across the fence, Alexander stood in his study, the sleek lines of his estate a stark contrast to the turmoil in his chest. The polished desk before him was cluttered with reports for today's board meeting at Hayes Ventures, but his thoughts were on Olivia, her admission. "I love you too" had cracked open a part of him he'd long sealed off, filling him with a reckless determination to protect what they'd rediscovered. Yet Sophia Reed's call last night, her voice sharp with irritation over the gala photos, lingered like a warning. "You're letting this woman distract you, Alex. The merger's on the line." He'd brushed her off, but her words gnawed at him. The merger was critical, a multi-billion-dollar deal that could redefine his company, but Sophia's ambition felt like a leash, and he was done being tethered. His phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Good luck with the meeting. Call me after." He smiled, her words a quiet anchor. "Will do." "Thinking of you," he replied, then grabbed his jacket and headed out, steeling himself for the battle ahead. At Hayes Ventures' downtown headquarters, Alexander strode into the boardroom, the city skyline framing the glass walls. The table was lined with executives, their faces a mix of anticipation and unease, but Sophia Reed commanded the room's attention. Her tailored blazer and sharp gaze radiated control, her auburn hair pulled back tightly, Good to see you, Alex, she said, her smile tight. We have a lot to cover. The meeting began with projections and timelines, but tension simmered beneath the numbers. Sophia pushed for the merger, her voice clipped as she outlined synergies and market dominance. Alexander listened, his mind half on Olivia, half on the company he'd built from nothing. When Sophia referenced the Gali article, "We can't afford distractions right now," his patience snapped. "This isn't about distractions," he said, his tone low but firm, cutting through the room's hum. "It's about priorities. Hayes Ventures isn't just numbers, it's people purpose. I've spent years hiding behind this company and I'm done." The board shifted uncomfortably, but Alexander pressed on. "The merger's solid, but if it means losing sight of what matters, I'm out." Sophia's eyes narrowed, her voice icy. "You're risking everything for a fling that's not the Alex I know. It's not a fling," he shot back, standing, his hands braced on the table, "and the Alex you know was running from his past. I'm not that man anymore." He turned to the board. "We'll vote on the merger next week. I want revised terms, less control to the parent company, more focus on our community initiatives. If that's not feasible, I walk." The room fell silent. Sophia's jaw tight with barely concealed fury. After the meeting, she cornered him in the hallway, her voice low. "You're throwing away years of work for her. She's nobody, Alex. She's everything," he said, his gaze unflinching. "And if you can't respect that, we're done." He left her standing there, her ambition no match for the clarity he'd found. Back at the cottage, Olivia paced the living room, her scarf twisted in her hands. The headline still stung, and Sophia's call had planted seeds of doubt. Could she fit into Alexander's world with its boardrooms and power plays? Her phone rang and Alexander's name flashed on the screen. "It's done," he said, his voice steady but tired. "I told them what matters. You matter, Liv." Her heart skipped fear, mingling with relief. What about Sophia, the merger? "She's out if she can't align with my priorities," he said. "I meant what I said last night. I choose you. Always." Olivia sank onto the couch, her eyes stinging. "I'm scared, Alex. Your world is so much bigger than mine. Then we'll make our own world," he said softly. "Just us. No headlines. No boardrooms. Say the word and I'll scale it all back." She laughed through her tears, the sound shaky but real. "You don't have to quit your empire. Just be here. With me." "I am," he said. "I'm coming over. We'll figure this out together." As she hung up, Olivia looked out at the garden, the roses glowing in the dusk. The fear was still there, but so was hope of a fragile growing thing rooted in the love they were rebuilding one choice at a time. The late summer sun bathed Olivia Bennett's cottage in a golden haze, its warmth seeping through the open windows as she unpacked a box labelled Aunt Eleanor in her careful handwriting. The scent of lavender from the garden mingled with the faint must of cardboard, grounding her in the moment. The past weeks had been a whirlwind. Alexander's declaration of love, his bold stand at the board meeting, the way he'd chosen her over the empire he'd built. Each step had chipped away at the walls around her heart, replacing doubt with a cautious hope that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Now, as she prepared for Aunt Eleanor's arrival, Olivia felt the weight of another milestone weaving Alexander into the family that had anchored her through every storm. Eleanor's stroke had left her weaker, her once steady hands now trembling, but her spirit remained fierce. Olivia had found a small apartment nearby, owned by the kindly Mrs. Patterson, who'd agreed to rent it at a modest rate after hearing Eleanor's story. The move was a leap of faith, bringing her aunt closer while testing the fragile new bond with Alexander. Olivia glanced at the Neruda book on the coffee table, its worn pages a reminder of the love she and Alexander were rebuilding. Could he fit into this part of her life too? The messy human part that demanded patience and care. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Alexander stood on the porch, his grey eyes bright against the morning light, a cardboard box balanced in his arms. "Delivery for Team Eleanor," he said, a playful smile tugging at his lips. "Mrs. Patterson sent over some kitchen supplies for the apartment. Thought I'd drop them off." Olivia's heart warmed at the sight of him, casual in a white shirt and jeans, his usual CEO polish softened by the morning's ease. "You didn't have to," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "But thank you. Eleanor's arriving this afternoon, and I'm a little overwhelmed." He set the box on the table, his gaze softening as he caught the tension in her voice. "You're doing a lot, Liv. Let me help. What's the plan?" She hesitated, her fingers twisting the yellow scarf draped over her shoulder. Opening this part of her life to him felt like peeling back another layer, exposing the raw edges of her devotion to family. We're setting up her apartment today. Furniture linens, making it feel like home. Mia's driving her up, and I want it to be perfect for her. Alexander nodded his hand, brushing hers, a fleeting touch that steadied her. Then let's make it perfect. I'm yours for the day. By noon they were at Mrs. Patterson's apartment, a cosy space with wide windows overlooking a small courtyard. Mia arrived with Eleanor, her laughter filling the car as she helped her aunt out, her curly hair bouncing with every step. Eleanor, her silver hair neatly pinned, leaned on a cane but carried herself with quiet dignity. Her eyes lit up when she saw Olivia, then narrowed slightly as they landed on Alexander. "So you're the neighbour," she said, her voice warm but probing. "I've heard a lot about you." Alexander extended a hand, his smile genuine. "All good, I hope, Mom. I'm here to help." Eleanor studied him, then nodded, a spark of approval in her eyes. "Well, let's see if you're as good with a screwdriver as you are with words." The day unfolded in a flurry of activity, unpacking boxes, assembling a small bookshelf, hanging curtains. Alexander moved with quiet efficiency, his hands steady as he tightened screws or carried furniture. But it was his ease with Eleanor that surprised Olivia. He listened to her stories of Atlanta, her days as a librarian, her love of mystery novels, responding with a warmth that felt effortless. When Eleanor struggled to open a jar of preserves for lunch, he took it gently, his smile teasing. "Let's not let the jam win, Miss Eleanor." She laughed, a sound Olivia hadn't heard in months, and patted his arm. "You're trouble, young man, but the good kind." Mia caught Olivia's eye, mouthing, "He's a keeper." Olivia blushed, busying herself with arranging pillows, but the moment lingered. Watching Alexander with Eleanor patient, attentive, eased a knot in her chest she hadn't realised was there. He wasn't just the man who'd broken her heart. He was someone who could belong here in the messy, beautiful chaos of her family. By evening the apartment was ready, a cosy haven with Eleanor's favourite armchair by the window, a stack of her novels on the coffee table. They sat together in the courtyard, sipping lemonade, the air soft with the hum of crickets. Eleanor reached for Olivia's hand, her grip firm despite its tremble. "You've done good, Liv. This feels like home." "It's not just me," Olivia said, glancing at Alexander. He helped. Eleanor turned to him, her eyes sharp but kind. "You hurt my girl once, Alexander. Don't do it again. But I see you trying, and that's something." He met her gaze, his voice steady. "I won't, Miss Eleanor. I promise." As they walked back to the cottage, the stars emerging overhead, Olivia felt a shift, a quiet certainty that Alexander was becoming part of her world, not just her past. She slipped her hand into his, the warmth of his fingers intertwining with hers, a silent vow. "Thank you," she whispered, "for today." "Always," he said, squeezing her hand. The garden waited ahead, a testament to their slow, steady rebuilding, and for the first time Olivia believed they could grow something lasting. The moon hung low over the city, its silver light filtering through the branches of the oak tree in Olivia Bennett's garden, casting dappled shadows across the lavender and roses. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers, a quiet symphony that wrapped around Olivia as she walked hand in hand with Alexander Hayes. The evening had been unplanned, a spontaneous suggestion to stroll through the nearby park after a long day of settling Aunt Eleanor into her new apartment. Olivia's yellow scarf fluttered against her jacket, a familiar anchor, but it was Alexander's warmth beside her, his fingers laced with hers, that grounded her most. The past months had been a slow dance of rebuilding trust, each step garden, talks, shared meals, his gentle presence with her family, mending the fractures of their past. Yet tonight, something in his quiet intensity, the way his grey eyes lingered on her, stirred a nervous flutter in her chest. The park was nearly deserted, its paths winding past lampposts that glowed like soft beacons. They paused by a small pond, its surface rippling under the moonlight, reflecting the stars like scattered diamonds. Alexander stopped, turning to face her, his expression a mix of determination and vulnerability that made her breath catch. "Liv," he said, his voice low, almost swallowed by the night stillness. "There's something I need to say." Her heart skipped a mix of anticipation and fear. "Okay," she said, her voice softer than she intended, her fingers tightening around his. "What is it?" He exhaled, running his free hand through his dark hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as his way of steadying himself. "These past weeks being with you, with Eleanor, even Mia, they've shown me what I've been missing all these years. I built Hayes Ventures to prove I was enough, but it was never about money or success. It was about you, about us." He paused, his eyes searching hers raw and unguarded. "I love you, Olivia. I've loved you since we were kids, and I'll love you for the rest of my life. I don't want to lose you again." Olivia's throat tightened, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. His words echoed their rain-soaked confession on the porch, but this felt different, deeper, more certain. She wanted to speak to tell him she felt the same, but her voice caught, overwhelmed by the weight of the moment. Alexander reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Her breath hitched as he opened it, revealing a simple ring, a single diamond set in a delicate band, understated yet radiant like the love they'd been rebuilding. He dropped to one knee, the gravel crunching softly beneath him, his gaze never leaving hers. "Olivia Bennett," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "I choose you every day for the rest of my life. Will you marry me?" Time seemed to stop, the world narrowing to the space between them. The moonlight, the pond's gentle ripples, the warmth of his hand holding hers. Olivia's mind flashed through their history-stolen kisses under bleachers, the pain of his absence, the slow healing of these past months. She saw the boy who'd written her poems, the man who'd stood up to his boards, the partner who had carried boxes for Eleanor with a smile. The fear was still there, whispering of past hurts and public scrutiny, but it was drowned out by a louder truth: she loved him wholly, irrevocably. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking into a tearful laugh. "Yes, Alex." His face broke into a smile, bright and unguarded, the kind she had fallen for at 17. He slipped the ring onto her finger, its cool weight, a promise she felt in her bones. Then he stood, pulling her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was both tender and fierce, sealing the moment under the stars. She melted into him, her hands gripping his jacket, the world fading until it was just them two souls choosing each other against all odds. When they pulled apart, breathless, Alexander rested his forehead against hers, his hands framing her face. "I was so nervous," he admitted, a shaky laugh escaping him. "I've been carrying that ring for weeks, waiting for the right moment." Olivia laughed, wiping her tears, the ring catching the moonlight. "It's perfect," she said, her voice soft. "You're perfect." "Not perfect," he said, his thumb brushing her cheek, "but I'm yours, always." They sat by the pond, her head resting on his shoulder, talking about the future, a shared home maybe in the cottage or his estate, a place where Eleanor and Mia could visit, where their love could grow. Olivia imagined a garden of their own filled with roses and memories, a testament to their second chance. Alexander spoke of scaling back at Hayes Ventures, delegating more to focus on her, on them. "I don't need the empire," he said. "I need you." As they walked back to the cottage, the night air cool against their skin, Olivia felt a quiet certainty settle over her. The ring on her finger was more than a symbol. It was a vow, a choice to build a life together, free from the shadows of their past. They paused in the garden, the oak tree looming above its branches, whispering in the breeze. Alexander pulled her close, his lips brushing her temple. "We'll make it work," he said. "Whatever comes headlines, so fear the world, we'll face it together." Olivia nodded, her heart full. Together, she echoed the word, a promise as solid as the ring on her finger. The garden with its roses and lavender stood as a silent witness to their love, a reminder that even broken things could bloom again. The garden behind Olivia Bennett's cottage was transformed, bathed in the soft glow of early autumn twilight. Fairy lights were strung through the branches of the oak tree, their delicate shimmer mingling with the golden hues of sunset. Rows of white chairs lined a petal-strewn aisle, leading to an arch woven with roses and lavender, their scents heavy in the warm air. It was exactly 1 year since Alexander Hayes had knelt by the pond and asked Olivia to marry him, and now, as the first notes of a violin drifted through the evening, their wedding day unfolded like a dream they'd both fought to reclaim. Olivia stood in the cottage's bedroom, her reflection glowing in the full-length mirror. Her dress was simple ivory lace that hugged her frame, its sleeves sheer and flowing, a nod to the elegance she'd always carried quietly. The yellow scarf, now a cherished relic, was pinned into her hair, its frayed edges softened by a delicate braid. Mia, her sister, fussed with the veil, her eyes misty as she adjusted the fabric. "You look like a Queen Liv," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Mum would have been proud, and a little annoyed you didn't go for something flashier." Olivia laughed, the sound easing the nervous flutter in her chest. She'd have wanted a cathedral and 1,000 guests, she said, her smile bittersweet. The memory of her mother, her fierce love, her painful interference still stung, but forgiveness had come slowly softening the edges of that betrayal. I just want this. Us. Here. Mia squeezed her hand, her curls bouncing as she nodded. You've got it. And that man out there, he's all in. I grilled him. You know. He passed. Downstairs, Aunt Eleanor waited, her silver hair gleaming under the soft light, her cane resting against the couch. She pulled Olivia into a gentle hug, her trembling hand steady with love. You're radiant, honey, she said, her voice warm. He's lucky to have you. And you're lucky to have him. Olivia's throat tightened, her eyes stinging. Thank you, Aunt El, for everything. Eleanor's recovery had been a quiet miracle, her presence here, a testament to the family that had carried Olivia through her darkest days. She glanced out the window where Alexander stood under the arch, his dark suit tailored to perfection, his grey eyes scanning the crowd with a nervous energy that made her heart ache with love. The music swelled, signalling her cue. Mia handed her a bouquet of lavender and roses, and Olivia stepped into the garden, her breath catching at the sight of their gathered loved ones, colleagues from the community health centre, Mrs. Patterson beaming from the front row, even Lauren, Alexander's assistant, who'd become an unexpected friend. But her eyes locked on Alexander, his face breaking into a smile so bright it rivaled the fairy lights. He looked like the boy she'd loved at 17, but also the man who'd fought for her, who'd chosen her over his empire, who'd carried boxes for Eleanor and laughed through Mia's interrogations. As she reached him, he took her hands, his fingers warm and steady. You're beautiful, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. I can't believe you're mine. The officiant, a kind-eyed woman from the community centre, began the ceremony, her words weaving a tapestry of love and commitment. But it was their views that anchored the moment. Alexander went first, his voice clear despite the tremor in his hands. Olivia, you were my first love, my greatest mistake, and my second chance. I lost you once because I didn't believe I was enough, but you showed me I could be every day with your strength, your heart. I promise to choose you, to fight for you, to build a life where you never doubt your worth. Forever. Tears slipped down Olivia's cheeks, her heart full as she squeezed his hands. Alexander. She began, her voice steady, despite the emotion. You broke my heart once, but you also helped me find it again. You've shown me that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice, a promise. I choose you every day through every storm. I promise to stand by you, to love you, to build our home together. Forever. The crowd sighed, a soft ripple of emotion as they exchanged rings, the diamond from that moonlit night now joined by a simple band etched with their initials. The officiant pronounced them married, and Alexander pulled her close, his kiss deep and certain, sealing their vows under the oak tree's watchful branches. Cheers erupted, but for Olivia the world was just them, the warmth of his lips, the steady beat of his heart against hers. The reception unfolded in the garden tables draped in white linen candles flickering and a small band playing soft jazz. Mia gave a toast, her withdrawing laughter, as she recounted Olivia's stubborn independence and Alexander's persistence. Eleanor raised a glass, her voice strong despite her frailty, blessing their union with words of wisdom about love's resilience. They danced, Alexander's arms steady around Olivia, his breath warm against her ear as he whispered, "This is everything I ever wanted." Later they slipped away to the bench under the oak tree, the party's hum fading behind them. Olivia leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, the ring catching the fairy lights. "We did it," she said, her voice soft with wonder. "We're here." "We are," Alexander said, his fingers tracing hers, "and we're just getting started." He spoke of their plans, a home that blended her cottage's warmth with his estate's space, a garden for their future, a life where Eleanor and Mia were always welcome. Olivia smiled, imagining lazy Sundays, shared coffee, maybe even children running through the roses one day. The night stretched on the stars bright above, and Olivia felt a profound peace settle over her. The pain of their past, her mother's interference, Alexander's departure, the years of doubt had led them here to this moment of choice and love. They'd faced the world's scrutiny, Sophia's ambitions, their own fears, and emerged stronger, bound by a promise to choose each other every day. As the last guest left and the fairy lights dimmed, Olivia and Alexander stood in the garden hand in hand. The oak tree loomed above its branches, a silent witness to their journey, from heartbreak to healing, from loss to love, ready for forever. Alexander asked, his smile soft but sure, ready. Olivia said, her heart full. They walked toward the cottage, the future stretching before them, a canvas of hope painted with the colours of their second chance.